Hello and welcome to the Matrix Fitness Podcast. My name's Matt Gleed, and today with me I've got a very exciting guest who's going to be talking about health and wellness, and I'd like to introduce you to Karlie.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Dr. Karlie Intlekofer. Thank you so much for having me, Matt. I really appreciate it, getting to spread the word about something I'm very passionate about. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a neuroscientist by training, but my roots are in health and exercise science. I was really interested in, believe it or not, in being a personal trainer for elite athletes when I was younger. I played a ton of sports, from track and field and volleyball to rugby, and I stuck with those sports for many years. What I found was that I was really curious about exercise motivation and how people get themselves to complete those really tough workouts and get to the highest level of competition or performance. What I found out in the real world was, when I started personal training, that there are far more people who just need help establishing a regular habit of exercise. So I started to look more at the health span and how people age at that point when I was in college. And I was really fueled by this because I have relatives who have aged beautifully, still doing really fun physical activity, hobbies, golfing, tennis, riding their bikes. And I have relatives who have aged and had much more health issues. And most of that's related to their relationship to exercise. So, if you're a type 2 diabetic and you have multiple amputations, like, it's going to create so many more barriers in your life. And I knew I wanted to age in the former case. I wanted to stay active and stay committed to my passions. But I knew that it gets more difficult with age. So I started looking at aging, the differences between male and female brains, how hormones change throughout the life cycle, and I've published on many of those things. More recently, when I was postdocing, I looked at how exercise affects learning and memory and your ability to focus, because it completely changes the brain over time, and even one workout changes the brain. So that became my focus, and I published book chapters on that and other papers on that. And then I went into teaching at the University of Vermont, where I taught the neuroscience majors about all of these like behavioral things. And I always tried to sneak in some encouragement for exercise and physical activity. So that was a wonderful connecting point to then working for Matrix Fitness, where I'm the global wellness researcher. And what I do here is I support our group exercise and our biomechanics team. And I also do a lot of program and product development. So it's an exciting role to play, and I'm just so grateful I get to take the latest research and translate it into actionable findings that can be understood by everyone, because it's a pain to slog through some of these papers. They're long, they're wordy, they're complex. And so I want to make it as distilled and as simple as possible so that people can be using the latest info rather than info from the 80s or the 90s that could be flawed in many ways to get to their health and fitness goals.
Well, I mean, it's certainly our luck that we have somebody like you on our Matrix team, because the research that you do and the way that you are so passionate about making sure that we're accurate with information and that we have got the best brains working on what we're going to turn into practical application. It's certainly our benefit. And indeed, many of the listeners who to this will be operators or people working within facilities which have got Matrix equipment. So I'm sure that it's a great insight for them to understand who is it who's working on that latest trends and who can actually start to develop the philosophy that we have, which the equipment supports. But ultimately, it's about a philosophy of, I mean, certainly what we're going to talk on today, which is not just fitness, it is about health and wellness. So maybe that's a great place to start. Could you just tell us your thoughts and the vision that you have and some of the work that you've been working on in terms of the emphasis on health and wellness?
Well, a lot of times in this industry, of course, we tend to simplify it so far down to where it's just about like muscles and cardiovascular health, and that's certainly important. But anything you're doing that benefits your body health is benefiting your brain's health too. We often forget that the brain is part of the body. So if you do something that allows you to have better muscle control, part of that control is because your brain is more coordinated. A power lifter is doing a completely different mental task when they're coordinating their muscles for the squat or a powerful deadlift. Compared to someone who's like crunching numbers all day. It's a very different motor task. So the brain is always involved, from benefits to blood flow to benefits to size, benefits to processing speed. And wellness is really a bigger, all-encompassing circle, right, of how we define our health. It's our ability to understand and to accept our capacity, and also to help us lead a really purpose-filled and engaging life. And that's really important, that engaging piece, because we all want to be the best versions of ourselves. So wellness kind of encompasses that general positive feeling that you get about what your future holds for you. And that also allows us to embrace our full potential. That means our physical potential. You know, there's a quote, and I can't remember if it's Aristotle or who, but it's like, it's something along the lines of like, one of the greatest missed opportunities is to become the best physical version of yourself. Like, man is wasting their opportunity to have the best physicality possible. I really agree with that. Not that I'm always every day following my own goals there, but basically with wellness, we're talking about a type of health that extends to your emotional health, your intellectual health, your social health, which is really important, and probably one of the areas of wellness that's taken the biggest hit from the COVID situation. Also, just understanding your health at work, your health within your relationship to the environment, and that way you can, pursue all of life's possibilities. Really, it's a way of reducing the limits that hold us back from reaching that full potential. So wellness is a huge concept, and it's actually very fun for me to get to read global research on this, because different research groups kind of take it in different directions. Different people have different ideas on it, and then we try to synthesize that with a lot of our offerings to make sure that the programs that Matrix comes up with, the products that we develop, are in keeping with this holistic wellness concept. So it's gonna be easier for you to adjust that spin bike because it's super intuitive. It's going to be easier for the staff to clean it because it's just one bolt attachment takes apart the whole cover of the flywheel. It's going to be easier to move this around if you're trying to keep these bikes distanced now that we have to be 6 feet apart because they tip onto their wheels and they've got a really easy handle. So all of these considerations go into making the experience as positive as possible. So even though it seems distinct from what goes on in the gym, wellness is very, very closely tied to it. And the people who are getting those workouts in, who are getting their commitment to exercise executed fully, they tend to have the best wellness because, again, what's good for the body is undoubtedly good for the brain.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such an incredible insight because it almost feels like a lot of fitness companies do things purely from a point of view of, well, this is the goal that the customer had, or this is the goal that the client had, so we're going to make this piece of equipment, and we'll just, this is the best for the body. But actually, you're right, it's such a link between the mind, the body, and the way that people are going to find the usability of it. It's all behavior, isn't it? And that really is. It's great to have somebody on board who actually really keeps that message and that flag flown so high as well.
Yeah, I'm really interested in habit forming technologies. And sometimes this gets a bad rap because I think all of us are a little bit addicted to our cell phones and, that scrolling process. And sometimes people think that, technology is taking too much of our time or too much of our attention. But I look at it like it's a tool, like any tool. So it could be used for a bad thing if I'm like doom scrolling past midnight about all the like difficult news that's occurring right now. That could be a negative in my life, or I could use it to connect with my mom who I haven't been able to see for since Christmas. So I look at it as just, everything's got both sides. It's just how you use it. And similarly with a piece of equipment, there are some people who are maybe their form is terrible, maybe they're exercising too much, maybe they're picking an intensity that's not appropriate for them, or they can use that exercise equipment or that group exercise class to have a really profound change in how they feel about themselves, how they think, their body composition, fitness, all those other things. So it's kind of just depends whose hands it's in and how it's completed. So that's why Matrix tries to keep a very close connection to our customer base, especially those folks who are running gyms, running those clubs, because we know that when they feel empowered, excited, and positive, that has like almost like a trickle down effect because they're going to bring that good attitude every day to work. They're going to bring that attitude to their members, who ultimately are the ones that we are really focused on helping. We're trying to get people into those gyms. We're trying to get people into those spin bike seats or onto, some excellent equipment that they enjoy or in a class that they're engaged in. And again, all this to support that holistic concept of wellness, that comprehensive whole person approach.
So when you're looking at these things, because I mean, you're talking about behavior patterns there, and I mean, social media is such a habit formed, which I mean, in my generation, I remember, getting a phone at the age of 16, and and I felt like I was late to getting a phone. But there's certainly my generation which are now very used to it, and I mean, I've got a 12-year-old daughter who's using technology all the time, and for
Mm-hmm.
her, like if she's in trouble and I take her phone away from her for a couple of days, I mean, she's lost. And it almost is, like you say, it's about habit forming. How do you foresee that we can use technology and kind of use it within the fitness world? Because obviously the health, fitness, and well-being, it's so closely linked. I mean, for example, I use sleep apps where I will do meditation or use them to kind of wind down at the end of the night. But yet I'm using my phone, which is the technology piece, in a different way during the day. So there's so much crossover. Where does somebody like you, where do you start to think about the balance between technology being used in a positive way? Where do you feel like the technology can be almost detrimental, or if so, is it ever detrimental?
Yeah, I think that, since the lockdowns have occurred in almost every country worldwide, there's been some degree of lockdown. What we've seen emerging is that there's been this really powerful step forward in hybrid technologies where you take a personal connection, because that's unfortunately something that you lose when you're scrolling Reddit or Facebook or whatever your vice is. And what this is doing is it's connecting the club channel directly to their most valuable members. It's connecting that staff member directly to who they maybe were going to personal train in person, but now if they've got a health condition, they're personal training virtually. And it's making this all a lot easier. So I think that what's happened is we've accelerated the hybrid approach from the gym setting, and that's a real positive. I think one of the downsides is that most people don't have enough self-regulation to recognize when that scrolling is becoming problematic. Or if you're like me, you might recognize that it's happening, but sometimes you're a little bit powerless to, you know, push the phone away or shut the laptop at the end of the day. The good news is that this has been addressed with a lot of different unique apps that allow you to limit the amount of time you have on something that might be a little bit too habit forming. So like as an example, I use something called Leech Block. And what that does is it lets me set times during which it's okay for me to use Reddit or Imager or Facebook or Pinterest, and times when it's not acceptable. I can also put time limits on how long I use those apps. Similarly, you were talking about your smartphone at night. I've got an iPhone, so I use like their like bedtime, like I don't want notifications after this hour. I removed all of my pop-ups or anything that would let me know about anything going on. So it's made me be more conscientious about my use of that technology. When it comes to fitness, we're seeing this huge shift in people being much more accepting to a virtual solution. And like I said, there's limitations there. And from a neuroscientist, I'm not going to go too in depth, but you know, us connecting through a phone or a text message, when you and I connect, I won't have the same brain response as if we were connecting in person. So something that people are dealing with now that they may not even be aware of is some level of like social um, they have like a social debt almost, because we're not getting the same FaceTime with loved ones, with friends, with family, the same social gatherings, the same feeling of oneness with your community. And I think sometimes that's reflected in what we see online, especially when it comes to like really negative Facebook comments or YouTube comments where people just, there's a lot of negativity out there. The biggest thing to recognize is that you can control what you focus on, and that shapes your reality. It shapes your perception of what's going on around you. So if I decide that I want to focus on gratitude, and I have a gym that supports me in that because they have like a bulletin board up where people put up what they're grateful for, maybe they have an online connection point where we can, all right, it's Friday, what are you grateful for? If somebody primes me to think about thankfulness, I can suddenly start to focus more on the positive. And it doesn't take much to where you can start to change people's attitudes, change people's minds about how they're feeling. Are they feeling hopeful or not? Well, if you haven't thought about something you're grateful for in months, maybe you have no hope. So I think that this is a real opportunity for gyms to decide, what do we want people to focus on? Now, I'm aware of the stats. Americans here in the US, we've got obesity rates, hovering just under 40%. We've got prediabetes and type 2 diabetes combined at about 60% of Americans. We've got high blood pressure for at least 1 in 3. That's the ones who are diagnosed, not the ones who are undiagnosed. We've got a lot of health disparities. And I can choose to focus on that because actually the papers really cause me to focus on that. Or I can focus on how one exercise session is all it takes to have a better mood. You can significantly improve your mood within 10 minutes of doing cardio. That can get me to change my behavior and go and do the thing that I might say I'm going to do, but have trouble committing to, like cardio or jogging or whatever I'm doing. So I can choose to focus and switch that script so I'm focusing on the positives and on the potential. I can post things about someone who made a huge health transformation and really took this COVID time to focus on themselves and self-care. And I can post that on Facebook, or I can post something about the current political climate or the current issues that we're dealing with racism. I can choose what I show to the world and what I take in. It's just I have to be conscious of it, and that's difficult. So the word that you used, which is perfect for this, is mindfulness, because mindfulness isn't some like woo-woo, religion associated like new state of mind. Mindfulness just means being here and now and paying attention, paying closer attention, rather than letting yourself be swept away by hours of mindless scrolling, which, don't get me wrong, all of us also do sometimes. It's pretty natural. So this, I think, is another opportunity for people who are involved in the fitness industry to really give different types of resource options for folks where they can maybe participate in online classes where they do some mindfulness practices, or maybe just starting to instruct whoever your personal training to focus on their breathing more. Breath work is actually really well supported to reduce stress and anxiety and to help you be more in your body. Our brains are so powerful. We tend to project ourselves way into the future and have all these worries and anxieties. And we also tend to think a lot about our past. I know sometimes I'll just randomly think of something I did that was really embarrassing when I was a kid or a teenager or in my 20s. I don't like that I do that, but my brain does that. So our brains can either help us or hinder us from being in the now, but being aware of that and practicing that, those are two key steps if you want to start feeling better right away. So I think, we tend to think about health disparities, like I just was mentioning, type 2 diabetes, obesity, those things. Those take years to develop. Heart disease takes 7 to 14 years to develop. Same with diabetes. Diabetes is a result of the death of certain cells in your pancreas that produce insulin. It takes years until enough of those cells die to where you have out of control blood sugar. Were those people tuned in to their eating choices for all those decades before the onset of disease? Probably not. Certainly not consistently. So I look at the fitness industry as being this really important bridge to something that you can take action on, to being able to empower that end user. And for anyone who's not working for the fitness industry but is interested in fitness, it really comes down to a personal responsibility, believing that you can change your behavior, to change your mind, to change your body, to change your current circumstances. And a lot of that comes down to mindfulness. So that's been a hot topic actually since COVID began, because people are reporting higher levels of stress and anxiety that we've ever really seen since we've been surveying folks or having them come into clinics. And I think that's going to continue because we probably realistically have another 6 to 12 months of some form of lockdown or differences in our life. And at least in the US and certainly in some other countries, we're dealing with a massive economic contraction where we're just really struggling when it comes to jobs and opportunity out there. So I think mindfulness is going to be huge, and that's actually one of the tips, as like a piece of advice I could give to any gym member or gym owner or staff member. Try to find a way to bring this offering to to your members, even if it's just like, hey, we're going to take 10 minutes of silence and do some deep breathing, or 3 minutes of breathing. It takes at least 6 deep breaths, about 3 minutes, before you get that stress reduction response. But I mean, you could incorporate that into like almost the beginning of every exercise, maybe before the warm up, or maybe at the end, similar to the Shavasana in yoga. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and we're just now beginning to understand how powerful this is. So I think people are hurting, and gyms are really a great way to reach out to others, to reach out to a community of people who believe in living healthier lifestyles.
Yeah, I think I love the way that you've linked almost the gyms and the fitness facilities are the action point of being that mindfulness, because like you say, when I first saw the lockdown situation happening in the UK, I would know when 8 o'clock in the morning was on, because my social media would be going crazy with everybody about to do a HIIT workout to start your day. And I knew when lunchtime was on, because it was the time when, again, classes would pop up. I know when 5 and 6 o'clock would pop up. But yet nobody was popping up at 10 o'clock to say, hey, we're going to do a 10-minute mindfulness session. We're going to just allow you to now unwind. You might have just finished your favorite TV program, or you've watched a film, but at 10 o'clock at night, we're going to start a 10 minutes at 10 to just unwind. And it would be really interesting to start to see operators offer that other side of the coin, where it's not just about go, go, go. It's sometimes about stop, reset, and, slow down at the end of the day as well. So I mean, look, if this inspires any one facility to do that, I think that's a good action point as well. Are there any other tips that you could give, in particularly facility owners, or any recommendations, or anything that you think the future of wellness would actually, as a fitness offering, we could actually start to action for that better wellness and mindset as well?
So one of the things that you mentioned was HIIT, and high intensity interval training workouts are a great time saving option. But there are a lot of folks out there who hear the term high intensity and they go, oh my God, that's not for me. Or the sprint intensity, they go, oh, I can't sprint, that's not for me. Of course, it's scalable to everyone based on where they're starting from. But if we're going to be honest, there's an element of discomfort to reaching higher intensities, because you're breathing harder, you're sweating more, your heart is racing, and you're producing more lactate. So, there is a discomfort element there. If somebody is not as fit as they used to be, which, by the way, that's on average most people, according to how active we've been since COVID, they may need something that is lower intensity. So I think a savvy instructor or gym program should include offerings that are catered to a wide range of fitness styles. So that may be a low intensity workout even. And I know we don't see many of these because we tend to not, there's not a lot of gyms who engage in this, but people's exercise tolerance really shrinks, especially if they've got chronic conditions like some of the ones that are very common in the US and other developed countries, where their fitness, their heart capacity, their vasculature, their breathing rate, all of those things might be impacted by a health condition or by age even. A lot of people, you're not going to train an 80-year-old the way you train a 20-year-old, but with a lot of these virtual offerings, you don't know who's tuning in. So what I would suggest is that those gym owners encourage their staff members, or if you're a personal trainer or a group exercise trainer, consider a few offerings that are much shorter, a much lower of intensity, because we really want to make sure it's as inclusive as possible. I've been really in touch with the research since COVID started, because I was curious what was going to happen. What I was reading online was like, oh my gosh, Peloton bikes are selling like crazy, and the home fitness market is booming, billions in that market, and people are getting all this exercise equipment. But if you look at indicators of how active people actually are, it doesn't match what people say. So as an example, in the UK, there was an early report that said that like 70% of people said that they were exercising way more than usual as a result of COVID. The weather was nice, they're going for more walks, who knows? But if we actually look at like the Fitbit, for example, Fitbit is they've got 30 million users. So if we look at their data for step count, we see that virtually every country saw a big drop starting in March and extending through the summer. Some countries dropped dramatically based on how COVID was affecting the lockdown. And some of this is understandable, right? Because like in Italy, when COVID hit there, they had an almost 30% drop or something in their step count. That makes sense. Russia, 17%, the US was down about 15%. We saw these huge decrements everywhere. So when someone tells me, I think I'm being more active, I'm like happy for them, but I don't necessarily believe that that's the average situation. So I think that our fitness levels, once we get some really good studies where they like measure those objectively, I think we're going to see that our fitness levels have dropped from this. People need social support for exercise motivation. They really benefit from that group experience or that community feel. When you walk into a gym and you see the familiar faces, those smiling faces, I know because I've moved a lot for different degrees and jobs. When I go into a gym, I don't always know people's names, but like I kind of recognize who they are and I kind of know the workouts that they do just because I go a lot. And that's a part of the community feel for me. So it's not even like an interaction that requires talking. Sometimes it's just a feeling you get. And I think a lot of people are going to realize home exercise equipment's great, but are they using it? Um, are they using it as much as are they working out as hard as they would in a gym? Some people can probably do that. I'm just gonna be honest and say I'm not one of those people. I just don't push myself the same way as if there's someone next to me throwing a punch or someone next to me, um, you know, lifting with intensity. Those things kind of cue me in that this is the environment where I work hard, whereas my living room where I like snack and watch Netflix, that doesn't give me the same environment. So I don't have that same environmental cue and trigger. I'm certainly working on it, but I got to believe that other people in that same category, and Fitbit bears that out. There's other things too. If we look at smartphone data, there's smartphone apps that will count your steps for free. And like if you look at the month of April and May, that was down by 50% in most of the United States. So again, what does this all mean taken together? I can't say for sure, but it looks like our fitness level's dropping. So one of the biggest things I'm hoping that this shows those those in the fitness industry is we need to drop our expectations of people's exercise tolerance. It's lower than you think. Give them easier versions of the workout if you're doing high intensity interval training, and consider some like, moderate like 12-minute classes or a 15-minute class, and let the people know it's for them. Use advertising imagery that shows them that you don't have to have six-pack abs to do this class. Not that that's a end-all be-all indicator of fitness, but you know what I mean. Show people of a wide range of ages and stages of life, to clue people into the fact that you're providing a wide variety of options for everyone. I had a back injury in my 20s that was pretty severe. And even though I looked really fit because I was coming off of a rugby season and I'd been doing a lot of powerlifting, I could not actually jump. And I couldn't believe how hard it was. I could not believe how hard it was to find a class that I wasn't being like yelled at or pushed by instructors, because they didn't know that I had bulging discs from a recent injury. They just looked at me and thought, oh, she's got a lot of veins in her arms. This girl can do push-ups. She's probably, she can do this sprint or this burpee. And it was like, I can't move quickly right now. I'm in pain. Well, chronic lower back pain affects 50% of people over the age of 60. So what are their options if they want to get more fit? You should have some
Yeah.
classes that are lower impact, lower intensity to cater to them. So that would be probably the big thing I think is going to be needed after this COVID hurdle is cleared, is just make it easy for people to get back into it, especially because we're using a hybrid solution. So you can't do things like correct form or anything like that. Keep it simple.
I think that's a great message, because I know personally myself, my own fitness. I mean, and again, because of my role as a master trainer, I'm always seem to be like, oh, well, it must be easy for me to push myself. And I'm always in the opportunity. I'm always surrounded by gyms. But actually, a lot of my work is actually giving my energy into educating and facilitating other people. So I do find myself, when I find I've done a hard day's work of giving everything to the other trainers that I'm in front of, sometimes I go home and it might be like, I, I don't feel like working out now, and I'm okay with that, and I've come to peace with that, because I know that I have my own self motivation, that I'll go for a run tomorrow morning, and I use that run to re-energize as opposed to try to fatigue myself. And I definitely found that from I used to go to an Orange Theory class a lot. And although I'm not going to that at the moment, because for me, that's the wrong environment, I would prefer to use the summer and to be outdoors as well. But I do 100% identify in what you were saying about my activity level is lower, my intensity is lower, but yet I'm still hitting my minimum criteria, but I'm definitely not at the peak of my fitness. And that has been down to the fact that I can't socially train with other people. And I just know that that's a common theme. And yet, as a fitness professional, the last thing I want to do is to go out there and start to sound like a cheerleader on steroids, where I'm just trying to push people to do more, more, more. So I think it's a great, I mean, as a takeaway from that, if facilities could start to offer low intensity training, and if they can start to offer the classes which have got a new standard, and then we can always, I mean, every fitness instructor loves making an option of making things harder, but actually keeping ourselves under a little bit of self-control to offer an appropriate level for anybody. And like you say, that hybrid model of in class and at home, it's got to be recognized as well. And without the amount of weights that people are using, home usage is high.
Absolutely. I just think that this community feel is so central to exercise motivation for a lot of people, that even though a lot of the home exercises being used and virtual classes are in demand, I'm very curious to see how this is going to change as we move into the winter, because a lot of people's outdoor activities will be eliminated. I mean, I'm in Wisconsin, so it's going to hit 0 degrees and people won't be running very often. What are they doing inside? And I know, as someone who used to reside in an apartment, that uh, it can be difficult to do an exercise class if there's a lot of pounding around. So that might be another option, is to make sure it's again, kind of like a low impact thing, might clue someone into like, oh, this is an apartment friendly workout. Matrix has worked to this end to really support the COVID shift. For example, as you probably know, we created over 28 days worth of body weight exercises. And then that was great because there's no equipment required. You can do it from anywhere virtually. And then that's available through our app and also available at more than 400 facilities already, because we wanted to make sure that those gym owners had an option that would, really keep people engaged, beyond just, it's just one of those things where you have to have a lot of options to serve a lot of people. So I think that things are, we're accelerating our progress in some areas, but again, I am really concerned about that end user. And in particular, if I could just make a prediction about the next year of physical movement for your average person, I think we're going to see a lot of people get constrained and they only do the same thing over and over again. And what we see is, when it comes to virtual classes, the top downloaded or the top streamed or watched ones are yoga. Secondly is high intensity interval training, but third is Pilates. Yoga and Pilates, you can see why that would work really well for an at-home environment, because you need minimal equipment. And high intensity interval training, I'm really happy about, because that tends to provide a lot more movement variety. But when it comes to things like a spin bike, which can be a great exercise, I mean, I used to be an avid road cyclist, so I totally get it. You get that exercise high, it feels great. But if you look at the position that a person's body is in for that entire workout, I mean, they've got like extreme flexion at the hip, their spine is curled, their shoulders are rotated forwards, their arms are way in front of them. This tucked position looks a whole lot like sitting. And that's what we do most of the time. So I look at that and I look at how aging affects the body. The muscles of your back tend to lengthen with age. The muscles of the front of your shoulders and your pecs tend to tighten with age. Your hip flexors tend to get super tight with age. Again, sitting, sedentary lifestyles, all that accelerates it. And now we have people who are working out primarily by sitting on a bike, tucked forward. Don't get me wrong, they can get really fit. But I look at movement variety as the next area that your average person who wants an active lifestyle is going to need to focus, because as we tend to focus on our lane, what we feel good about, what we're good at, what we're proficient in, we ignore and exclude the movements that we're not good at. I mean, I avoided push-ups like the plague until I was about 18, and I just finally had enough coaches to where I could get 10 good ones. And I've really tried to flip that for myself and work on my weaknesses. So like one year I worked on handstands the whole year. I mean, I did other things like surfing and yoga and rock climbing. Another year I worked on push-ups. I've been doing 10 push-ups a day since the beginning of COVID. I was doing 50, but then I started having a little bit more pain. Now I'm back into bench press again. Finally, I'm at the gym. These are things that people can work on, and you can turn your weakness into your strength. But again, if you're stuck on a bike as your only way of exercising, what is your hip flexor tightness like at the end of 6 months? What is your posture like? Is your back stronger? Can you hold your shoulders back? What do you look like when you're typing? So I do kind of worry about this, increased screen time where your screen's in front of you, your hands are in front of you, your shoulders are in front of you, your back is rounded, your posture is, let's just be honest, not good. Your head is really far forward. People lose the ability to retract that head and have like a taller posture. So all of those things combined, I do get concerned because I read a lot about chronic pain. And what is astounding is how much it goes up after about the age of 40. It just starts moving right up in prevalence because the movements that you do day in, day out are going to determine how your joints, muscles, bones, ligaments, tendons age. So I'm constantly trying to work on that. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I've got a spin bike. I love it, but I make sure that it's not the only thing I do. So when I hear Peloton raving about like, people are doing this many classes per week, and I'm like, I hope they are like stretching and strengthening and doing movements that don't include that tucked position all the time, because a lot of lower back pain is probably due to excessive hip flexion throughout your lifetime. So I think that's going to be another area, if I just had to make a prediction, where people will need to work more. And certainly if you talk to physical therapists, they talk about that sort of thing all the time, just movement variety. That's where something like high intensity interval training can really shine.
Yeah, and I think that's a great, because there is going to be the need, if in this hybrid option, because people are now working from home a lot more, if they are going to exercise, we need to complement what they're currently doing. It's not just about, hey, you used to come to the gym and do a lot of low level cycling at a moderate level. Now let's increase the intensity. Now actually, it's actually about, well, look, you do a lot of sitting, so let's complement that now. And almost, again, it's that mind shift, isn't it, about complementing what people currently do. And the needle has definitely shifted in our, not only our activity level, but in what we're focusing on as well. So I mean, Karlie, this has been great, because we get such a good understanding from the research point of view, but some of those statistics, especially the Fitbit statistics about how activity level tracking is definitely recognized as being lower. So, I mean, you can't hide from stats. And, when we start to look at that statistics, we might feel like we're more active, but actually, I mean, one of the things that we heard in one of our recent podcasts was there might have been a lot of people doing HIIT workouts, but the completion rate of workouts was actually a lot
Ah,
lower in HIIT
yes.
training as well. And I think that was mainly because a lot of people thought, yes, this is good, but actually when it did start to get hard, people might duck out of that workout earlier, because are we trying to push people who are not conditioned at the current level that they used to be? So they don't like the feeling of not being successful. And ultimately, success does breed motivation as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I struggle with this personally, and I know this isn't about me, but I just want to share what I have to do because I've had to navigate exercise motivation forever. I used to look at that 2-week gap between sports and high school, and I'd be like excited to just sit on my butt and do nothing. Yet, I also started to recognize that I didn't feel as good. I didn't get my homework done. My room was messier. It's like my world would kind of fall apart for those 2 weeks, and yet I would like look forward to it. So I've got like an internal laziness that maybe some people out there can relate to. I don't know, maybe not. Fitness industry has a lot of go-getters, but I have to really work on this for myself. So I had this goal of doing all this yoga. I was like, oh, maybe this is a great opportunity to return to yoga due to COVID lockdowns and due to being like isolated. Well, I would start a video and then like, this is too hard, switch it, switch it, switch it. What I ended up doing is I now have appointments with friends across the country where we literally FaceTime each other and start the video at the same time. So I'm on the hook so that he or she can see when I'm not doing the triangle pose anymore or holding my plank anymore or chaturanga push-ups. I literally need to have someone else do it with me, even if they're virtual. And we need to have visual confirmation that we're doing yoga, because that's the level of where I'm at, where I am probably one of those people
Yeah,
who
well,
would
it's just
not
training
complete
partners,
the
isn't it?
workout.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean, you
hard for me.
Yeah, you're always going to be more
Challenge.
successful training with a partner. And if that is a gym buddy, now, like you say, you've got a screen buddy to do your yoga with or to do your workout with. It certainly makes you, like you say, responsible and, on the hook. Like you say, you're going to tune in and you're going to turn up and you're going to complete it together. So you've certainly found yourself the get out of jail card there, because you're going to get your workout done when someone else is going to be FaceTime you at that time, which is great.
Well, I think as
Uh,
we get older, we just have to look at the results of our actions or inactions with a little bit more honesty. And my own self reflection has really told me that, it's easy for me to sprint with all my heart when a coach is yelling at me or when I'm trying to chase a girl with a ball or chase a ball. I don't have that same intensity all by myself. It just hasn't been a habit. And one of the big disruptors of COVID has been our physical activity habits. So, whatever it takes, no matter where you're at, I think if you can make it fun, enjoyable, and social, it's always a win. And is that social connection to my friends the same as in person? No, but it's the best that we can do right now. And that is the attitude I'm trying to embrace as we try to get back to what I would consider a better and normal place where all the gyms are open and they're full and we're enjoying it. And it might take time for people to bounce back to those gyms because, we see polls showing that somewhere between like 40 and 60% of those folks they don't intend to return. But I do predict that at least some of them are like me and they thought that they could get the same intensity or the same outcomes using virtual options, but they find that the real in-person experience, there's just nothing like it. It's just so much more empowering, and I'm just so much more motivated when I can work out on a wide variety of high quality equipment rather than, in my room or my apartment with my 15-pound dumbbells because that's all I have or whatever it is. So I do think that the time is coming. It's just we kind of got to wait for the whole vaccine situation and the safety situation to get all those seats back in. And in the meantime, gyms are doing a great job of practicing social distancing, keeping it really clean, and the transmission rates in gyms appear to be extremely low compared to, let's say, restaurants. So there's safety factors that are there. It's not 0% risk, but it's very low. So that's very encouraging. It tells us that those gym operators are really working hard to sanitize between uses and keep things spread out. So I'm enthusiastic for the future. I know it's been a hard summer, but I think that this has been very insightful for everyone to learn about themselves and their patterns and their habits when things like that familiar cue or trigger is removed.
Yeah, no, Carly, this is such a great conversation, and I just really appreciate your time because your views are just at such a high level, but you're making it so practical that gyms can learn from this as well. So, Carly, we'll start to wrap it up there. Again, thank you so much. I'm sure the listeners have got a lot. If anybody has got any questions which you'd like us to put towards Carly, then let us know at Matrix Fitness in the UK, and we'll pass those on. But Carly, thank you again so much for your time.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.